3、2。
Good morning, distinguished speakers and honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Masters Forum of the 2020 Tang Prize in Rule of Law. We would now like to invite the Executive Vice President of National Taiwan University, Dr. Ming-Hsien Chen, to give us the opening remark. Welcome, Dr. Chen.
Professor Ye, and Dean Chen, and dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of National Taiwan University, I would like to welcome each of you to participate in today's event, the 2020 Tang Prize Master Forums. It's our great honor to have the 2020 Tang Prize Laureate in Rule of Law join us. Explicitly, we are joined by the representatives from 3 NGO non-government organizations, including BELA, the Bangladesh Environmental Lawyer Association, Dejusticia, the Center for Law, Justice and Society from Colombia, and also the Legal Agenda from Lebanon through teleconference. And they will be sharing with us their valuable accomplishments as active practitioners and advocates, reinforced by solid academic research and training in their areas. It is noted that these 3 NGOs are from different areas of the world, where the foundation of rule of law are faced with severe challenges. However, they have never ceased to initiate strategic regulation, backed up by innovative readings of constitution and statutes, so as to protect the rights of vulnerables, as well as to promote individual, social, and individual justice. At the same time, these 3 NGOs also make remarkable contributions in advancing general public's understanding of the rule of law through education and advocacy, thus promoting people's awareness of rights and also realize the application of law in our social life. So we are very looking forward to the valuable experience they are going to share. In fact, we will also be joined by the past laureates of rule of law during the forum discussion. I believe the insights to be shared today will bring very valuable dialogue, not only to the audience here, but also to the members of international community through teleconference. Once again, I would like to welcome all participants to today's important events, and I trust you will have a very fruitful forum to enjoy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Chen. We will now take a group photo. Please remain seated and allow our photographer to take a group photo from the stage. And 3, 2, 1. Thank you. Now, let us welcome the moderator for today's forum, Chair Professor of National Taiwan University, Dr. Jiunn-Rong to the stage. As a reminder for our online viewers, if you have any questions throughout the forum, please click on the Slido link below the live stream channel to submit your questions. Thank you. And Dr. Ye, the floor is yours.
Good morning. My name is Jiunn-Rong Ye. I was the chair of the selection committee for the Tang Rule of Law Prize. I'm so privileged to be the moderator for today. With us are 3 laureates that we recognized this year for 2020. particularly in this pandemic, and my friends in other part of the globe, in different time zones, they can participate. We are so grateful and thankful. It's also very good that Tang Prize Foundation chose National Taiwan University Law School to be the venue for this forum. We have Dean Chen Chongfu with us, and many of the colleagues here. We also joined by many representatives of Taiwan major NGO in the area of human rights, in the area of judicial reform, environment, and other social justice issues. We are so happy and so grateful that particularly in this time of pandemic crisis, we can still make this happen. Thank you for everyone. You put this together, not only for Tang Prize, for Taiwan, and for the globe, for social justice and rule of law. The workshop, or I should say the forum, is going to be going in this way. We will introduce 3 laureates of 2020 Tang Prize Rule of Law to share their views for us. And then after that, it will be followed by 4 discussions. And then we have Q&A, particularly for those people who are on site. You can present your question through Slido, and we will look at that and choose some of the issues for our representatives of the laureate and all our discussion to debate and to talk about and to reflect. Let me introduce 3 laureates for 2020 Rule of Law of Tang Prize. The first one is Bangladesh Environmental Lawyers Association, and it's based in Bangladesh, Southeast Asia. And then Dejusticia, the Center for Law, Justice, and Society, is based in Colombia. And then Legal Agenda is based in Lebanon. They are going to share with their view, their activism, their spirit, and their value to us. Let me begin with the first one, BELA. BELA promotes environmental justice and develops sound environmental jurisprudence relentlessly, keeping people at the center of its activism. With us are the Chief Executive of BELA, Rizwana. I wish Rizwana now is online. So, ladies and gentlemen, would you please join me by a big hand, welcoming Rizwana to talk. Rizwana, please.
Hello. Is this when I start my presentation, or I just say hello to all?
Okay, Rizwana, you can begin to talk now.
Yeah. So is this my presentation or is just my introduction?
Okay.
Is this my presentation? I'm entering into my presentation. Hello?
Yeah, please go on. Yes.
Well, thank you very much. A very good morning to all of you. Let me start by thanking the Tang Foundation for nominating BELA as one of the recipients of this award for rule of law. And I think the Tang Foundation actually deserves a special thanks from all of us, from the recipients, for organizing this forum despite the odds of the pandemic. I'm very happy to be sharing with you my thoughts on the role of NGOs in environmental protection. And when I do that, I'll actually be doing it from my own work experience as an environmental justice advocate and as a climate justice advocate. Before I get into the formal part of the presentation, please allow me to congratulate the other recipients for the same award. And at least 3 of us know that every morning is not as rosy as this one. So we are trying to celebrate and be happy as much as we can. I'll first try to introduce to you all my country a bit. So Bangladesh, as has already been said, is a South Asian country. It is the largest river delta of the world. It is the 8th most populated country of the world. Per capita land availability, however, is one of the smallest in the world. But despite the fact that our per capita land availability is very low, our farmers have taken us to a level where we can say that our country is self-sufficient in producing our own staple. Bangladesh is a country of rivers, is the largest river delta. We are the second largest producer of sweetwater fishery. We host the largest mangrove forest of the world. It is called the Sundarbans. And because we have the Sundarbans in Bangladesh, we have the Royal Bengal tigers also in Bangladesh. Unfortunately, it's actually becoming very threatened globally. The environmental issues that Bangladesh faces are very, very complex and very diverse. It's a small country with many people. Most of our environmental problems originate in Bangladesh, but we have serious environmental issues that originate at the global level and at the regional level. We do actually share rivers with our neighboring countries like India and China, who are the upper riparian countries, and Bangladesh is the lower riparian countries, which means that Bangladesh does not necessarily have the control over the flow of the water. You can see in the map how the various rivers are entering into Bangladesh from China, Nepal, and India. So this is one of the major rivers in Bangladesh. This once was a stream of a major river, which was very mighty, and we would associate ourselves with every disaster, water-related disaster with this river. But you can see that because of arbitrary withdrawal of water by the upper riparian countries, this part of the river has dried up. So you still see the bridge that was constructed over the river, but now you see that buses are plying on the bed of the river. So our common rivers are dying, our common rivers are drying up. This is the map of Bangladesh. On the left-hand side, you can see the map as it stands today. Because of climate change, if the sea level rises by 1 meter, then the entire map of Bangladesh will have to be redrawn differently, because 1/3 of the coastal area of Bangladesh will go underwater. So the entire map will have to redraw. Bangladesh is one of the most vulnerable countries due to climatic change. And if the sea water actually intrudes into the mainland, the second largest sweetwater fishery of Bangladesh, about which we are very proud of, will actually be destroyed, because the sea water will be getting into the river water, which is widely used for fishing purposes, navigation, inland navigation purposes, for irrigation purposes. The irrigation and the fishery function of the rivers will definitely not be there anymore. And most importantly, this already overpopulated country will be faced with more challenges to deal with more people with even less landmass. The Rule of Law Index that has been published in March 2020 shows that out of 26 countries of the world, the rank of Bangladesh for rule of law is about 155, which means in all the four criteria of rule of law, like accountability, having just laws in place, having open government in place, having an impartial and accessible judicial system in place, Bangladesh is not giving you any good news. The capital of Bangladesh, which is Dhaka, is the most densely populated capital of the world. We have a staggering population of 47,400 per square kilometer. Dhaka has been ranked as the 7th worst livable city of the world. So we actually keep on traveling from number 1 to number 7. So this has been our best performance. The air of the capital of Dhaka is often the worst polluted of the world. So we compete with Delhi. Most of the time Delhi is first and we get the second position. And we are actually planning to have 29 new coal-based power plants, which will be adding more and more polluted air into the already polluted atmosphere. All the natural resource bases of the country are actually depleting and degrading. You can see how hills are being raised. You can see how natural forest is being cleared for cultivation, for setting up of industries, or for commercial monoculture. This is a picture where you can see how wetlands are being filled up by very powerful realtors. They're actually dumping sand on the wetlands, violating all the existing laws and plans on town planning. The industries are polluting the water bodies. On the right hand side at the bottom, you see this is how the tannery, which is the second largest export money earner for Bangladesh, was polluting one of the prime residential area of Dhaka and also one of the major river flows of a river through Dhaka. So this was actually ranked as the 5th most polluted industrial cluster of the world. This particular industry has now been relocated to a planned industrial estate. However, it's not still complying with the legal norms. So now coming down to my presentation on the specific roles that NGOs can play or the objectives with which the NGOs who are working with environmental justice or protection of environment work. I would first like to say that the NGOs actually largely supplement and complement the sustainable development agenda of the government. The extensive network that NGOs have in Bangladesh, we can actually take many of the services of the government down to the people. We are working here for protection of all the natural resource bases that are being depleted and degraded. We work with communities, we work with grassroots communities, we educate them on issues, we mobilize them on different environmental justice issues, and we empower them by telling them their legal rights and entitlements. So in this process, we actually instill confidence in the societies when there are debates like, is 100% renewable possible, or we should still be continuing with coal or nuclear or LNG? It's actually the research, the work with the NGOs that tell the audience that yes, perhaps it's possible and the process can start. So we can feed the process of public debate also. And all this education problem, the education process, the research process, the dissemination process, the community engagement process actually raise vigilance among communities. And in many parts of the world, it's not only in Bangladesh, local communities have become vanguards in the protection of the Mother Earth. NGOs are widely kind of, I would say, feared because of their watchdog roles. They monitored the performance of the public agencies. They also put an eye on the functioning of the private functionaries. We want to ensure accountability in the functioning of the government, so we put checks on system excesses. And one of the ways we do it is through asking for information by using the Right to Information Act. And I'll show you an example of that. NGOs actually work as democratization force. We talk to the communities, we get their views, we educate them, and we then take their voices to the people. So in the process, the gap that exists between the bureaucrats who sit here in the capital and the people whom they are actually trying to govern, we bring their perspective into the entire policy-making ambit. NGOs actually work to shape the politics around rights. So we are rights advocates, and our agenda is actually highly political. I'm not saying partisan, it's highly political. And if you see the credibility of this sort of agenda earning from the global community, you will see that in the European countries, they have come to form green parties. And in Iceland, you see that a person who is running the government is actually representing the green bloc. So the credibility has increased manifold. We represent and defend people's rights, the rights of the communities, their environmental rights, against state atrocities and corporate malpractices. We, of course, demand accountability in the functioning of the private sector. So we denounce corporate capture that kill the space for the communities, and we actually claim spaces for the traditional livelihood earners. We work for better laws, we work for better implementation, and we work for better institutions. We encourage the public agencies to perform better, and we demand better environmental governance, which means people have to be consulted before decisions are taken about the natural resources on which their lives are dependent. People have to be told about what decision the government is taking and the basis of such decision. And if the government crosses its limits, then there has to be a mechanism in place where, by availing which we can hold the government accountable. We promote sustainable alternatives, and all these roles played by the NGOs actually help the government in fulfilling, help the governments in fulfilling their responsibilities as laid down in Principle 11 of the Rio Declaration, that want the governments to enact effective environmental laws, to set environmental standards, to set management objectives and priorities. I would say that the work of environmental NGOs is very value-centric, and this value can be anthropocentric, like putting people at the center. It can be ecocentric, like putting natural resources, environment, ecosystem at the center. And this has actually led to defining values in the society. At the moment, Bangladesh is very worried because one of our city mayors has decided to take off all the stray dogs from one part of the capital and relocate them somewhere else because he considers them nuisance. And we can see that the youngsters coming out in protest and saying that it's not only human right that you have to respect, it's also rights of the animal. So this sort of activities of the NGOs actually question many atrocious behaviors of human beings who consider themselves to be superior. And they also have the beauty of, instigating compassion in the society. NGOs are not only value-centric, they're also process-oriented. One thing that I would like to flag here is when we challenge action, we don't really challenge an individual or a particular agency. What we target is system. And what we target is system change. And with globalization and pandemic, the dynamism of environmental NGOs are rapidly changing. We have to denounce the false practices like GMO. GMO can genetically modified food, genetically modified seed can be solution to all your food problem. We have to denounce this sort of positions. These are some pictures where you can see that we are organizing the communities against industrial pollution. If you see the woman there, she lost her son who was working in the shipbreaking industry because of the reckless operation of the shipbreaking industry. Her son died. So we worked to get compensation for her for the death of her son. Here you see that we first applied, the first application under the Right to Information law in Bangladesh was made by our organization. We asked for information about a building which has been developed right in the middle of a wetland by the Bangladesh Garments Manufacturer and Exporters Association, which is very powerful. An entity is the largest export earner. But they constructed a building without an approval and they constructed it on the wetland. The other picture that you see is where we challenged the faulty environmental impact assessment of a coal-based power plant, which the government is building up right by the site of the largest mangrove of the world, which is called the Sundarbans. So we have raised voice against a world free from plastic. We have denounced the activities of the European government and European business people in sending their toxic-laden vessels on our beaches. And we are demanding food that will be safe from pesticides, herbicides like glyphosate, which has been proven to be carcinogenic. This is the picture of shipbreaking. You see the entire vessel that's dismantled by 250 malnourished workers of Bangladesh, all manually, in no mechanized way. And here you see the BGMEA building, which has finally been declared illegal by the government, by the court. So this building will have to be torn down. We have many challenges, the NGOs. The state at times considers the NGOs as opponent. The international financial institutions fund projects that we consider as anti-people, anti-environment. Corporate interest often takes over public interest, and the state loses its entity as regulator and sides so much with the corporation that you can't really differentiate between which one is state and which one is corporation. So this sort of undue interest has an impact on the functioning of the NGOs. Last year alone, 430 environmental human rights defenders were killed who were fighting against mining projects, who were working to defend the rights of the indigenous community to defend their territories, who were fighting against the realtors. Authoritarian regimes are increasingly terming NGOs as foreign agents, enemies of the state. We are treated as anti-development elements. So they are trying to criminalize our entity and our functioning. They're trying to seize power so that they can assess our performance and de-license us if we go against their development or other narratives. Cases are being filed against NGOs on very false grounds, and we are devoid of freedom of law, freedom of protection of law, freedom of association, freedom of speech, and freedom of expression. All these negative elements are actually weakening NGOs as democratic force. Here, Bangladesh is no exception to it. 3 years back, the government enacted a law to regulate what they call is flow of foreign fund, but in reality, what they're proposing to do is to control the functioning of the NGOs, and they want to assess us and de-license us if they find us critical of their views. So this is where we were opposing the law, and we said it's actually oppressive. NGOs have internal challenges also. All of it is not very rosy. We struggle with our financial sustainability. Many NGOs have weaker internal governance. We are unable to retain and attract qualified people because we don't really have adequate fund of flow all the time. And in authoritarian regime, the style is to divide the society. So many states, many governments actually try to brand NGOs as belonging to this party or the other party. And NGOs also fall prey of this sort of game by the government. So they get some partisan affiliation, which affects the objectivity and neutrality of the NGO functioning. But recognition from Tang Foundation actually helps us in gaining credibility, in outreaching more people, in our struggle for attaining sustainability. So we demand that all barriers that are there against free functioning of NGOs must be removed if the governments are committed to their promises to uphold democracy, sustainable development, and intergenerational equity. We all have to unite ourselves to mobilize the communities to resist activities that are damaging to ecosystem and nature, and we have to transform the society for a much better world. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Rizwana. It's a great remarks. I was pretty touched by a deeper understanding of the environmental degradation and issues there, and what kind of work you group have done. We all know that if you want to get the worst air quality, go to Dhaka. If you want to see the most populated area, go there. You want to experience the tension of human development and environment, go there. In Bangladesh, maybe environment is not a luxury. Environment is life. People are losing their life, are losing their health because of the environmental degradation. But a group of lawyers, they got together and they take the challenge. They want to make a change. They are lawyers through legal means. But the backdrop, the institution, legal infrastructure are much need to be improved. So they are in a very challenging time. Thank you, Rizwana, for this sharing. Let's move to the second laureate for Tang Prize in Rule of Law, and that is Dejusticia. We are from Southeast Asia and across the Pacific to Colombia. Dejusticia takes a distinctive, ambiguous approach that effectively combines vigorous academic research with energetic social action and litigation in a broad range of themes. Dejusticia is represented by two persons that are with us today. The first one is Vivian. Vivian is the executive director of Dejusticia. And Rodrigo, he was the co-founder of Dejusticia. Together, they are going to share with us their view about Dejusticia's work and the challenges they are facing. Vivian and Rodrigo, please, let's give them a big applause. Okay, Vivian, go.
Thank you very much. Should we proceed? Okay. Let me just start by saying that we don't have such a good presentation of Colombia because we don't have that much time since we're sharing with my colleague Rodrigo, but we can provide it if any one of you over there are interested. We can provide us a brief introduction to the situation of Colombia, the political and environmental situation also of Colombia and Latin America, if it's of good use for you down there. So let me just say, as it was mentioned before, that it is a big thank that we have to give Tang Prize for co-laureating the collective effort of Dejusticia. We are honored to receive from Taiwan a prize named after the Tang dynasty, representing a golden age of civil and academic government in Chinese history that is filled with the values that we share, with flexibility, openness, tolerance, meritocracy, and knowledge-based decisions. We're also very humbled to share the prize with the previous laureates that we deeply admire, some of which are today with us because they represent a perspective of the rule of law that transcends formalisms and concentrates in material justice, in liberalism and equality. And thanks finally to our Taiwanese colleagues and friends with whom I hope we're starting to have a long and lasting, fruitful relationship. To approach the subject of Dejusticia as a contemporary non-governmental organization and the rule of law, my colleague Rodrigo and I will divide our plan in 3 parts. First, what is a non-governmental organization and how does an NGO differ from other private initiatives in civil society? Second, what is the concept for rule of law in which NGOs of contemporary civil society are involved, and how does Dejusticia conceive it as a tool for change, for social change? And third part, challenges of the past and the future for NGOs like Dejusticia. So the first part, what is it, a non-governmental organization? It can be defined as a not-for-profit collective entity that is independent from the government in terms of public funds, public services, or public function. This is a broad concept, but it leads us to many private collective entities that have enormous diversity, and they are created for many common purposes. But these purposes can be in turn divided into 2. First, when they address incidentally or indirectly government to attend specific interests of their own members. Or second, when they are born from civil society in order to deal with general citizen concerns beyond the needs of the creators, beyond the personal interests of the members or the founders. Their purposes require a permanent relationship with the government because this is the way to fulfill their mission. But at the same time, they need to be distinct and separate from government, hence this non-governmental character. The permanent relationship of civil society with government can be either to follow the direction established by power or to question it. Many private organizations founded by different corporations or by philanthropic purposes follow what is happening, follow the status quo, and give relief, for example, to poverty without even asking if there is injustice beneath this poverty. Other organizations prefer to address the roots of injustice that governments frequently ignore in issues such as the low redistribution of wealth, the violation of rights of vulnerable populations, and conflicts around territories and natural resources. This is the type of organization that Dejusticia represents and for which a new political constitution in 1991 symbolized in Colombia a new vision with inclusive fundamental rights, material justice and equality, more participation tools, and deeper sense of believing in public goods. Taking into account the distinctions set above, and based on our experience, we consider that in contemporary civil society, an NGO such as Dejusticia, and probably BELA as well, and Legal Agenda also, must have specific characteristics that make it different. These conditions depend on the voice, the origin, the interest, the funding, the mission, the strategies, and the connection to the government, which imply in sum that, and I will summarize it first, an NGO must be a result of a free decision from a collective of citizens. Second, lack profit. Third, be independent from the government or the state. Four, promote collective interests in the public domain, such as universal human rights, inclusive democracy, sustainable development, and environment. Five, be guided by a perspective of social justice and or social political transformation. Therefore, they are critical to the existing socioeconomic arrangements. Six, be led by a human rights-based approach. Seven, work with and or for grassroots organizations, vulnerable minorities, or historically discriminated groups, but also have a proper and legitimate voice. And last, understand a developed and complex concept of rule of law as a tool for social change. Bearing this in mind, we will now concentrate on the last condition that refers to the relationship between the NGO and the rule of law, and I give the floor to my colleague, Rodrigo. Rodrigo?
Rodrigo, are you online?
Can we hear you, Rodrigo? Is everybody listening to Rodrigo, or is it just me?
Rodrigo, if you can hear me, you need to press that mute. If you mute yourself, do you mute yourself? Can you check whether you have muted yourself? We don't mute him, right? Okay. Vivian?
Yes.
I have a suggestion. I know you may have the second part to talk, right?
Yes.
Would that be okay that we have a flexible way that you go with your second part and that's invite Rodrigo back to talk? Would that be okay with you?
Yes, it can be okay with me, but it is related to what he is saying first. So it doesn't work that well.
Okay.
So I don't know if Rodrigo, let me just. Rodrigo, are you, I'm going to.
Okay. Rodrigo, if that is all possible, can you leave for a while and then get online again? They may solve the problem. That may be the solution.
Sí, se bloqueó. Ok, bueno, pues, porque te sale mudo.
De pronto ahorita.
Oh, good.
Can you hear me?
Okay,
yes, good.
Yes, perfect.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, but
yeah, please start it over. No matter how far you have gone through, but please start it over. Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. I was telling good morning to everyone in Taiwan from the night in Colombia. So I'm trying to explain the philosophy of Dejusticia as an NGO. Dejusticia was created with the aim of strengthening the bridge that should exist between the academic world and social activists in favor of social justice. Academy and social activism, we understand that are different fields with specific logics. The academic world is centered on the search of truth and knowledge, usually at slow speed. A relative distance of scholars from passion and from the daily social and political struggles are important to guarantee freedom of research, without which knowledge and critical thinking cannot flourish. On the contrary, social activism implies a passionate involvement in these daily struggles, as the goal is to contribute to the transformation of social structures that perpetuate discrimination and oppression. So a certain distance of academy and social activism is healthy for democracy, but it cannot become a rigid separation. If all scholars refrain from any involvement in public discussions, the result is that politics and social activism cannot benefit from the new knowledge and the critical thinking associated with academic research. Thus, we strongly believe that democracy improves if some scholars accept the challenge of an involvement in public discussions and social activism. In Dejusticia, we have assumed this challenge. Our purpose has been to take some of the ethics, methods, and knowledge of the academic field into the public democratic discussions and into the struggles in favor of the rights of the most discriminated and marginalized groups. We know that we did not invent this idea, which was defended in the past by other institutions and scholars, such as the Colombian sociologist Orlando Falsborda with his notion of participatory action research. One of my sons has even argued that it is an idea as old as philosophy, as Plato's creation of his academy in ancient Greece has a similar purpose, although within an aristocratic conception. However, we claim some merit in having been able to materialize this purpose in a very difficult environment. In the Global South, in one of the most violent and difficult countries for human rights activism, which is Colombia, we have managed to create and sustain an institution which is a mixture of a center of academic interdisciplinary research on law and society, and at the same time, a passionate NGO involved in concrete struggles for social justice. This vision explains the tools we use in our daily work. Socio-legal research to produce new knowledge relevant for social justice, policy proposals and participation in public debates based on these researches, strategic and public interest litigation in favor of the rule of law and social justice, and informal education for grassroots organizations and human rights activists. In all these activities, we emphasize the importance of working with other civil society organizations, especially in a South-South cooperative international perspective. This bit of Dejusticia explains our vision of the rule of law and its relation to social justice. We agree partly with the notion formulated by prominent scholars, such as Professor Russ, the last recipient of the Tang Prize, that the rule of law implies the existence of clear general legal norms that are predictable, non-retroactive, and that must be respected not only by individuals, but also by authorities, in order to avoid arbitrary government and protect individual freedoms. Thus, rule of law implies separation of powers, and especially the existence of an independent judiciary with the capacity to control governmental abuses. However, in our daily work, we endorse a more robust and ambitious notion of the rule of law associated with the respect of all human rights, and not only with civil and political rights. Living in a society with acute discrimination, deep social inequalities, and widespread poverty such as Colombia, we have to articulate the struggle for a liberal notion of rule of law with the struggle for social justice and against discriminations and inequalities. For us, the rule of law incorporates also social and cultural rights and social justice, and can be summarized in the beautiful words of the preamble of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights: a world in which human beings shall enjoy freedoms of speech and belief and freedom from fear and want. And this implies a lot of challenges that Vivian is going to deal with. Vivian?
Thank you, Rodrigo. I'm glad you could have the microphone finally. So just to end our intervention, I will share three challenges that we have faced in the past using our methodology and the philosophy that Rodrigo explained to confront the deficits of the rule of law in Colombia and Latin America. The first one is the recognition of ethnic rights and equality of opportunities in Colombian society and the setting of a precedent for Black communities. For 8 years, Dejusticia guided and supported a legal action for the recognition of a collective property that led to the first judicial decision that reaffirms the importance of Afro communities in 2 islands of the Caribbean and their access to territory since slavery, maintaining the culture and the bond within hundreds of families in that Afro community. The second challenge that we faced in the past that I want to share is a careful litigation strategy with the NGO that works for LGBT rights that contributed to offer legal equality for same-sex couples so that now they can marry, they can adopt, and they can have social protection exactly as heterosexual couples, also contributing to change the approach of the Colombian society towards its historically discriminated group of people. And the third challenge is the Justicia's integral participation in favor of the peace process that finalized with the 2016 peace agreement and the end of more than 50 years of internal conflict between the Colombian government and the left-wing FARC guerrilla, which is now under the framework of a peace implementation. Through research, technical assistance to the peace guarantors, specifically intervention in public discussions, op-eds in national and regional media, litigation, communication pieces, capacity building exercises, and ideas for peace building, the Justicia provided for more than 5 years and continues to provide today analysis, arguments, and proposals that contribute to a very long and winding road of transition to peace in which we are presently, as of today, still struggling a lot. So I will now give the floor to Rodrigo so he can share what we consider the challenges of the future.
Thank you, Vivian. The Justicia faces huge challenges in the future. Most are common to most human rights NGOs, as our colleague of BELA explained, such as how to attain financial sustainability without losing independence, how to resist threats and attacks in difficult political environments such as Colombia, Lebanon, or Bangladesh, and so on. However, instead of making a long list of these very difficult challenges, we have preferred to concentrate in two interrelated risks for the rule of law nowadays: increased polarization and increased social inequality. In our societies, corrosive polarization has increased. Hate and lack of common sense are present in the killings and threatening of human rights defenders, in the stigmatization of NGOs, or in the closing of borders for migrants. We lack social spaces where reasonable and evidence-based arguments can be shared to nourish a reasonable decision-making process. At the same time, economic inequality has also increased significantly in almost all countries, with negative impact in social cohesion and the enjoyment of rights by the most marginalized groups. Both phenomena are somehow linked, as the increasing inequality feeds the emergence of authoritarian populist movements and social polarizations. The big problem for human rights organizations such as the Justicia is that our traditional tools, such as naming and shaming or strategic litigation, do not seem very appropriate to face these sort of challenges. For instance, how to use these tools to reduce polarization and promote democratic deliberation among those who are different? What are the effective strategies to use human rights to reduce economic inequalities? There are not easy answers to these difficult questions, which have become even more complex because of the pandemic. However, we strongly believe that the methodological approach adopted by the Justicia and other NGOs continues to be relevant in this new COVID-19 era, still surrounded by uncertainty. It's through a creative combination of academic research and social activism that organizations such as the Justicia and others can contribute to face these challenges to the rule of law. Today, more than ever, we feel then deeply committed to our mission and to our approach. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rodrigo and Vivian, for this very insightful presentation that was really sort of revealing lots of achievements and hardship and challenging conditions for the promotion of rule of law in Colombia. I think we all know that Colombia is politically and constitutionally very dynamic state. So working there through the means of law means a lot to the society. Dejusticia took a very holistic approach. So their issue, the issue they take care of, including same-sex marriage, environment, social justice, peace, all kinds of issues, all through the means of law. And they are facing also lots of challenges, needless to know. Thank you again, Rodrigo and Vivian, for your great contribution to the forum. Our last but not the least laureate for the Tang Prize in Rule of Law is legal agenda. So we crossed the Pacific Ocean, and then we crossed the Atlantic Ocean and overflow Africa, Europe, and into Lebanon. And again, Lebanon is a very politically dynamic state and society. And maybe everybody remember only not long ago there was an explosion and suffer a lot of casualties. We actually concerned so much because of this Tang Prize. So when that thing happened, we placed special concern to Lebanon about that casualty. We are very, very grateful that same Arbour was able to represent legal agenda, to share legal agenda's view, value, and operation and challenges with us. Samer is the co-founder and current the board member of the legal agenda. Samer? Samer? Yes, good, good. So, are you ready? Yes, please, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. It's very early in Beirut, actually, so I'm sorry if I look a little bit tired, but I'm very happy to be here with you today. And I would like to emphasize so much how happy and proud we are at the Legal Agenda to be one of the co-laureates of the Rule of Law Tang Prize with the Dejusticia and BELA. The Tang Prize comes as a big, huge support and boost to us in our fights for the rule of law, not only in Lebanon, but also in the Arab region, especially in the current very difficult conditions in Lebanon and the region, economically, socially, but also on many other levels. I have to speak today about the role of, starting from the example of Legal Agenda, I have to speak about the role of civil society in promoting judicial reforms. And that's what I will do, but I would just like to specify the agenda. We also work on other issues like socioeconomic inequalities, public spaces, individual rights, not only judicial reforms, even if judicial reforms is maybe our main or one of our main programs and activities in Lebanon, Tunisia, and other Arab countries. So in the first place, why civil society? Why do civil society organizations have to promote themselves judicial reforms? So to understand, to be able to answer this question, I will make a little introduction about Lebanon mainly, but Lebanon shares a lot of similarities with other Arab countries we work in. And then I'll explain why we need, as a civil society organization, to work on judicial reform. So basically, Lebanon, as some of you may know, Lebanon is a small country on the eastern shores of the Mediterranean Sea in the Middle East. It is known for its religious pluralism and for its power-sharing political system between different religious communities. So we have a political system in Lebanon where religious equality is guaranteed, while other individual rights are many times sacrificed, and while huge socioeconomic inequalities persist. So religious equality coexists with socioeconomic and inequalities, huge socioeconomic inequalities and lack of respect of individual rights. So the main characteristic of our current legal system is that we have a former legal system, a republic, a parliamentarian republic with a separation of power, parliament, executive, judiciary, etc. Like other Arab countries, it's the same situation. But on the ground, in the actual political life, things are not working at all as they should in a republic, in a parliamentarian system. So basically, we don't have a real separation of powers, we don't have checks and balances, and especially for us today, we don't have a real independent judiciary. So we really have like two parallel legal universes. One where we talk about the parliamentarian republic, the constitution, the independence of the judiciary, and the other where the judiciary is working under permanent interventions from political and religious interventions on a daily basis. That's why we need organizations from outside the institutional system, like the legal agenda, to play the role of a whistleblower, of course, and be able to criticize the real political game that ignores the fundamentals of the rule of law. Second reason why we have to, as a civil society organization, where we have to play an active role in promoting judicial reform, is that in Lebanon and most, maybe all Arab countries, we have governments and executive powers and legislative powers that are paralyzed by many times corruption, by the lack of political will, and by the lack of political means also. So we have coalitions in power where networks of public and private interests do not have any incentive to promote judicial reform. So we have a paralysis in the system where the judiciary is permanently used to promote the interests of the coalition in power. So no independent judiciary and manipulation of the judiciary in the service of private and public interests of the coalition in power. So that's why public institutions are not in a position to promote judicial reform, and civil society organizations like the Legal Agenda has an important role to play at this level. I will be talking very quickly, we don't have much time, but I will be talking about four main activities that we do as the Legal Agenda in promoting judicial reform in Lebanon, but also in Tunisia, Morocco, and other Arab countries. I'll be talking about monitoring the judiciary. I'll be talking about researching the judiciary I'll be talking about creating a different public debate about the judiciary in the public space, and finally about activism to change the judiciary and use it to make social change. So the first thing we do as a civil society organization on this level is to monitor the judiciary. This is where our judicial observatory plays a role, where we try on a daily basis to open the black box of judicial practices, of judicial institutions, and judicial work. Why do I say black box? It is mainly because most citizens in Lebanon and other Arab countries are not aware of what's happening inside the judiciary, of the judicial work, of the work of judges and lawyers. They're not aware because they see it as too much technical matters, too much complex, too much difficult to understand. So most legal and judicial matters are not known and discussed by citizens because and are not do not go through democratic debate and processes. So we try to monitor as much as possible judicial decisions, judicial practices, judicial debates, legislative debates about the judiciary, to make this information, one, accessible to the public, and to emphasize its social and political importance. We also use monitoring to focus on wrongdoings, on sometimes corruption, on political interventions that happen on a daily and weekly basis in the Lebanese, the Tunisian, or other judiciaries in the Arab country. And this monitoring role is very important because we use it to denormalize practices that became, unfortunately, very normal in the judiciary in Arab countries. Very bad practices where, for example, we see judges regularly visiting politicians or judges giving special treatment to rich and powerful people, etc. So these practices became very accepted and normal in Lebanon and other Arab countries because of the culture of the dependence of the judiciary. So we used our monitoring activity to denormalize these practices and show how dangerous they are for the rule of law. So this is the monitoring activity, which is our first main activity about the judiciary. The second main activity in promoting the reform of the judiciary is research. Why research is so important for us as a civil society organizations? We have been producing for 10 years now qualitative and quantitative original data about the work of the judiciary to know it better, how it functions. So it is very important to us to use social science methodologies like ethnography, ethnographical work, observation, interviews, archives, to try to understand judicial work and judicial practices from all their dimensions, legal, of course, but also social, political, etc. For example, we did big research on judicial practices under the authoritarian regimes in Tunisia and Egypt to understand how judges and courts behave in such authoritarian environments. We did other research, for example, on public interest lawyers and cause lawyers in Lebanon and Tunisia, trying to understand why most of the legal profession is oriented towards corporate law or business law, and only if a little minority only works on cause lawyering and public interest causes, trying to understand this phenomenon. and many other examples I can give. So, of course, normally it's universities who are supposed to do this work, but in our region, law schools and universities are often drowning in legal technicalities without any critical approach about judicial and legal phenomena. So we try to compensate and to complement that research with, while using critical theoretical tools, also to better understand how the judiciary really works on the ground. So this is research, our second activity. The third one, role we play in promoting judicial reform is creating another kind of public debate about the judiciary in the public spaces in Lebanon, Tunisia, Morocco, in Arab countries where there's enough pluralism and at least democratic environment to allow some public debate, which isn't the case of all Arab countries, of course. So we use our magazine, our website, our social media tools to encourage debate, social debate, public debate about relevant judicial and legal issues to make them understandable with all the implication and their dimensions for everybody. So we try to not let the ruling coalition in our countries determine what should be discussed in the public space and what should not be discussed. We try to impose our own issues that we think are very important for the rule of law to create a counter narrative about rights issues to that of the coalition in power. So this public debate component is extremely important because we have been also feeding mainstream media with elements about the judiciary that we produce through our monitoring and research activity. And the final, so this was public debate, the final component we use in promoting judicial reform is, of course, what I can call broadly activism, because we take all this data, original data produced, all this knowledge, the results of this public debate, we take it into action. We take it into action, for example, by promoting draft laws, like currently the draft law about the independence of the judiciary that is discussed in the Lebanese parliament, and we try to create debate and mobilization around it. We are into strategic litigation also, using the judicial arena to promote social change about LGBTQ rights, about the rights of drug users, about the protection of the public domain in Lebanon, etc. And we use all this data and this knowledge to give intellectual tools to other social mobilizations in Lebanon so they can use them in their own work on promoting specific rights or specific reforms in their own sectors. And we try through all this to change the normative and professional environments of judges and lawyers and law schools in Arab countries, because we think that this normative environment in which students, lawyers, and judges work is very important to change how the judiciary work in our region. So my time is up. So this is very quickly a very brief overview of the role we try to play as a civil society organization in promoting the judiciary, basically building bridges between knowledge production about law and judiciary and activism, and bridges between activists and legal professionals, and trying to build and foster a strong counter coalition in favor of judicial independence, judicial transparency, and in favor of the rule of law in Lebanon and Tunisia and other Arab countries, which is also a very difficult objective to achieve in the current political situation in the region. But the Tang Prize today is certainly a very valuable asset on that road and in this fight. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Summer. Well, I was very struck by that monitoring, research, and robust public debate and that kind of work, particularly that research. Research is a rock to the social activism of legal agenda. The research they do, they compile data and argue for that and spread, and this is wonderful. Not only in Lebanon, but it has spread to the Arab world on the topic of, but not limited to, judicial reform. Thank you very much for the representatives of these three laureates for 2020 Tang Prize Rule of Law. You know, in terms of rule of law achievements, someone could be a judge who make decisive decision, committed himself or herself in the judicial ruling. Could be the incumbent president, could be the mayor, could be ministers, could be commissioners of Human Rights Commission, could be any government official, could be a professor, could be professor come up with scholarly work, a tremendous impact to the society. Could be someone who involved in international mechanism, try to do things, push forward things in the international scales. Yes, over the years, Tang Prize in Rule of Law has chosen some of the laureates in the past, including in year 2014, Albie Sachs. He was here making speech, talking to people like a star, and was very, very energetic and very convincing in many ways. We also have Louise Arbour. She was one of the founders of the International Criminal Justice, was chosen in year 2016. In year 2018, the Tang Prize Rule of Law goes to Joseph Ratz for his contribution in jurisprudence, in mega theory that caused a tremendous impact to our legal world. This year is very different because in the past, we have different category of people who make great contribution in the area of rule of law. But rule of law is such a big thing, it takes different form to implement that. 3 institutions has been chosen at this time. We have our previous recipient of the Tang Prize, Laureate, to talk to us. Albie is from South Africa. Arbour from Canada. They are not online, but we have arranged this. Our executive director, Chen Zhenchuan, was so considerate. He found this is one of the best way to recognize the achievements and importance of this year's recipient. Ladies and gentlemen, we have the privilege to listen to our beloved Albie and Louise with their remarks. Please show the clip.
I'm going to do something very bold. I'm going to try and use rule of law principles in relation to the English language, because there's a phrase that's so pertinent now, so appropriate, and it's so ugly. It's powerful, and it says to kill 3 birds with 1 stone. I hate that idea of killing birds to make a point. So I'm going to change it what the Tang Prize Foundation has done with this particular award is to feed 3 birds with one hand, or even better, let's say, to pollinate 3 flowers with 1 bee. That's what you've done. And it fills my heart with a sense of joy and pleasure and pride to see that the prize this year is going to 3 organizations working closely with people on the ground, doing wonderful work. Point number 1, the first flower. The rule of law is so dependent on collective work. And the idea of giving the award to one great judge, one great legal philosopher, one great legal thinker, that's fine. But somehow there's something inadequate about that. It's the people teaming on the ground in all the different countries of the world, working collectively, the people in the different offices working collectively, the people doing the research. It's the whole combination of people involved in the processes of law that need to be acknowledged and recognized. So, Tang Prize Foundation, congratulations on spreading the scope of the award to acknowledge the collaborative aspect that's so central to the rule of law. Secondly, the NGOs, they play such a significant role. They are the interface between the lofty ideas of the law, the pronouncements, the legislation, the court decisions that are so important in providing a certain core morality, political morality for all the different countries and the people on the ground most affected, the people who need the rule of law the most. They don't have the money, they don't have the political connections, they don't have the power. All they have is a claim for justice through the rule of law, and they get together through NGOs, not dependent on government, not necessarily hostile to government, but outside of the political structures, working often with the political structures to bring about change and to make sure ordinary people are represented in the areas where the law is being determined and being applied. And thirdly, by giving the award to NGOs in this way, you can reach out to different countries, people working in different areas. Colombia, Spanish-speaking, the Lebanon, Bangladesh, each one doing wonderful work, and they represent so many other NGOs in so many different parts of the world. And I'd like to mention a story of how valuable, to me, sitting on the bench, on the Constitutional Court of South Africa, the role of NGOs was, and I'm sure all the other recipients of the award can testify, those who've been judges, to exactly the same thing. We had a huge problem in our country with the rights of people to have access to antiretrovirals when the HIV pandemic was hitting us so hard, and tens of thousands of people were dying because they didn't have access to ARVs. And we had 2 great NGOs in South Africa, the Treatment Action Campaign, representing people living with the virus, campaigning for the right of access, and the AIDS Law Project. And they got together, they brought a case to our court. When it was heard, the court was packed with people wearing T-shirts saying HIV positive. It humanized the issue. It made it real. It put human dignity at the core of the legal process, not just manipulation of words and concepts and ideas, but vindicating the fundamental rights of human beings. We made to feel that at all times, and the Constitution backed us up. We were able to use the Constitution to vindicate the rights, to ensure that antiretrovirals were made available, and it transformed our country. What was becoming a pandemic that seemed to be irreversible was under control, and the country breathed again. The dignity of people was being supported and vindicated through the rule of law.
There are several issues that I would like to share with you today as you engage in this conversation about the role of civil society in the development of the rule of law. The first one is the importance of civil society actors, NGOs, participating in litigation domestically. This could be done by initiating court cases, or, as was the case in Canada, particularly when I was on the bench, by NGOs intervening in ongoing litigation to advance a much broader interest than the immediate interest of the parties. This, I think, has been critical in the development of Canadian jurisprudence, particularly on human rights, environmental, indigenous rights issues, and I think it should be encouraged and indeed promoted. The other issues I want to raise are more in the international venue. The first one, I think, is the now very difficult issue of foreign funding for NGOs. Civil society actors are, needless to say, enormously dependent on philanthropy, and to the extent that their capacity is at times limited by limited funding, many have turned to the substantial capacity of particularly Western philanthropic organization, and there's been pushback in many countries against that. This is very troublesome, and I think one will have to hope for an engagement by the international community in support of local, particularly in developing countries, the need for NGOs to be supported and the pushback against governments trying to curtail their reach. In a similar way, I think another issue that I would like to flag, which was a growing concern when I was the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, and I understand has not gone away, is the increasing presence in the UN system of what are sometimes called gongos, that is essentially government hijacking civil society actors to advance very specific government interest. I think this is undermining the reach, the advocacy, the capacity of NGOs, and I think those who are aware of that should not be shy to denounce this kind of corruption of the genuine civil society movement. And finally, maybe in a very radical, futuristic way, I'd like to revive an idea that goes way back to the World Federalist Movement, the time of the creation of the United Nations and of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is the hope that one day we'll be able to maybe more formalize or institutionalize a space for citizens of the world to be heard in the United Nations system other than through the representation of states. This could be through the creation, for instance, of an upper chamber, a kind of Senate to the General Assembly. But I think if we want to be true to the idea of we, the people of the world, coming together, it's increasingly through the voice of NGOs that I think we are truly represented. Thank you.
It is always good to hear the voice from Albie and Louise, particularly in this time. They have set an example of how they can contribute to the world through legal means. And for lawyers and for people in the area of law, they are all models, but they took a very different role. They dare to challenge the challenging condition and dare to promote the value that they hold true and the mission they are committed to. Now, we are going to invite the representatives of some local NGOs to the platform. Let's welcome them. They are leaders of Taiwan's major NGO on the subject of human rights, judicial reform, environment, sort of parallel to our Tang Prize Rule of Law recipient. So they are also good in make the best of legal means to promote social justice, environment, peace, and human rights in Taiwan. So they are going to echo to our recipients' remarks. And together we are going to build up or envisage a better world for tomorrow through the work of civil society represented by NGOs. Let me introduce the 4 distinguished panelists that sit by my side. Let me begin with Robin Winkler. Robin, also known as Wen Lubin. He was the founder of Wild at Heart Legal Defense Association, 满野新竹生态协会, and also the former president of Environmental Jurist Association, 环境法律人协会. I know him for quite so long, has been working relentlessly in the area of environment and beyond. So if I don't see him demonstrating on the street, maybe in the forum, right? Okay, so we have Robin Winkler to join us. Next to Robin is also our respected former legislator, Mei-Nu. She also graduated from this great law school. She was the former legislator of the Legislative Yuan, representing DPP, also a former chairperson of Awakening Foundation, 妇女新知. On my left, Clarence Chou Yuxiu. He is now the chairperson of Taiwan Association for Human Rights. And then on my far left is Lucas Wang Rongquan. He is the chair of the International Cooperation Team for Judicial Reform Foundation, 民间司改会. Together, they are going to respond and echo what our recipients have just said. Can we begin with Robin? Yes, sure, please. Yeah, maximum 10 minutes, but please go. Yes.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you very much, and thank you to the Tang Foundation, and thank you to the all the participants, the 3 laureates, and the former laureates. It's really I can't emphasize enough how significant this is to have a major financial award and recognition to these groups. My own activity is probably most aligned with BELA, and I was reminded that perhaps I would speak to some of their activities and on that. I think the significance of this award for Taiwan to support these groups in Bangladesh, Lebanon, and Colombia really can't be overemphasized. I was I was born in the United States, and I've been in Taiwan now for 43 years, and I feel much more Taiwanese, although I don't look so Taiwanese, perhaps. But the importance of Taiwan reaching out and building bridges with the civil society in other countries is really our lifeline. Sometimes I say Taiwan not being a member of the United Nations actually might work in our favor, because the way things have been going in the world has not been very good for the environment. It's not been so good for rule of law and for social justice. So I think that Taiwan has an opportunity to sort of break from the mold, and it's done, this Tang Prize has done this, I think, with its award to the 3 organizations. Taiwan shares a lot of, I think, experience, and the other speakers will certainly address the human rights, gender issues, things like same-sex marriage. But in the environment, this is something, Taiwan, unfortunately, has a distinction of being one of the highest per capita greenhouse gas emitters. We have one of the highest consumption of plastics, and in fact, we're one of the major producers of plastics in the world. And we're very blessed that we have a great climate. We have a very rich agricultural land. Rizwana mentioned Bangladesh's self-supporting in staples. When I first came to Taiwan, we were very close to that. Now we've become increasingly dependent on imported as the tastes of the consumers change, or perhaps are even manipulated. But we have these issues with consumption, which is far more than our fair share. I think possibly we're in the area of a developed country in terms of our consumption, our reliance on electricity, per capita consumption of electricity and so forth. But these are all burdens on the future and on the other rest of the environment. So where you see a group such as BELA that's doing the kind of work in extraordinary adverse circumstances, it's very humbling. My main organization, Wild at Heart Legal Defense Association, is one of 3, as far as I know, and I have colleagues from the Environmental Jurists Association here and the Environmental Rights Foundation, and so we're working together quite a bit. So I'm interested to know whether or not our counterparts in Bangladesh and Lebanon and Colombia also have other groups that they're able to ally with, because the work that you're facing is incredibly daunting, and it's not something that's easy to do alone. I also wanted just to, some things that stood out to me, and again, I'm sorry, for Lebanon and Colombia, I think the other commentators will probably have more pertinent comments, but something that struck me from Rizwana's presentation was the mention of political involvement, and political, not partisan. And that's something that I have felt very strongly about, that if you look at politics as the obtaining and the distribution of resources, it's something that we all really must be very heavily involved in it if we're going to achieve our social justice and other goals. So I think that there's sometimes an ongoing tension between civil society and political organization, and avoiding being grouped in with, oh, you're just working with this political party or that political party. All these issues that we've heard about today they're apolitical in the sense that they're not a particular party's cause, but they're very political in that they're something that all of us need to be very closely related with and involved in. And so there's one thing I just wanted to close with, and it's something that puzzles me a lot. And we have philosophers and activists and all kinds of people, so maybe I'll get some answers. Taiwan's constitution, or the Republic of China, Taiwan's constitution starts with the first article. It says we're a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And I wonder why we're constantly having this tension with the government, if they're of the people, by the people, and for the people. And that's something that I think that we all need to look at and get more involved in. And again, thank you for having me today, and thank you to the recipients of the prize and the Tang Foundation and all the other panelists. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Robin. Now, Mei-Nu, you have the role. Yes.
First of all, I would like to congratulate our 3 recipients. I would like to congratulate the 3 NGOs. This is really a huge achievement, and thank you very much. Although we don't know each other, and Bangladesh, Lebanon, and Colombia are very far away from Taiwan. Maybe we have different religions, different languages, different cultures, different contexts. However, we understand that we pursue the same universal values: rule of law, human rights. We use similar measures, for example, strategic litigations and social advocacy, so that we can reach the same goal. So we are the same in our hearts. Before 1989, Taiwan was under martial law. Before that, law was lifted. We did not enjoy freedom. Women often suffer from domestic violence, rape. They're often even sold to other societies. So that was a society of patriarchy, and there have been individual women who use litigation to seek justice from the court system. But however, a lot of their rights have not been upheld, even within the judicial system. But when the Awakening Foundation set up the foundation and bring to awareness the importance of women's rights, then it was a time when women in Taiwan finally began to enjoy more rights. The Awakening Foundation looked at how important women play a role in modern society. Women are no longer affiliates to men. They are individuals. They have meaning in their existence. They are human beings. And it was because of the Awakening Foundation's efforts and other NGOs' efforts that we set up laws to protect women's rights. We even went to the Supreme Courts to amend the Constitution to protect women's work rights. There are other kinds of legislations, for example, laws regarding the combating of sex trafficking, or all kinds of laws that protect women's rights were finally in place to improve the status of women in Taiwan and protect their legal rights. So within 3 decades, we were able to change the Taiwanese society from a men-dominated society to a more gender-equal society. At the same time, in the year 2000, we had our first female vice president. In 2016, we elected the first female president. And in 2016, we also had a transgender minister without portfolio. In 2019, Taiwan became the first country to legalize same-sex marriage. And in 2020, the proportion of female congresswomen parliamentarians in Taiwan reached 41.59%. So that is why we would like to share with our NGO counterparts. In different times, law can become very useful tools to change society. However, we also need many measures in order to change laws. For Taiwan, we were very fortunate because during the process of democratization, we were able to work with people in other fields, for example, those who tried to struggle for labor's rights, etc. And they were able to assist each other so that we were able to have such achievements. That is why strategic litigation is very important. For example, in 1987, there was an incident, and because there were a lot of articles in the law that belittled women. So, at that time, women went to the streets to fight for their own rights. However, at that time, they actually do not have a basis of law. They want to go to the courts, but they do not have laws to use. So when we supported them, we found that without laws, it's not possible for us to enter the judicial system. And that is why we started to amend laws. Why do we need to amend laws? Well, because we discovered that in 1975, the UN actually designated that was the Decade of Women. It asked its member nations to eliminate all the laws that discriminate against women within 10 years. They also have to take positive measures to protect gender equality. In 1979, CEDAW was also passed, and they asked member nations to examine whether or not women's rights have been protected by using CEDAW. However, unfortunately, Taiwan was no longer a member of the United Nations after 1971. That is why we were not bound by CEDAW. And that was why the Awakening Foundation struggled very hard to amend laws. And the gender equality law is very, very important. For many corporations, they saw this as a bad law. That was why the law was unable to pass the legislature for more than 20 years. But this was very important. And we started to learn how to make laws, how to persuade parliamentarians. And we also convened the first hearing. So that was how we were able to generate public debate before a law was legislated. So it's actually very meaningful. But because when this law was sat in the legislature for more than 10 years, so a lot of women, they still need to, for example, adopt their husband's surname. They could not have their own property. This is a violation against gender equality. And this was finally amended in the Civil Code, but they did not send the law. We learned that we should not just use the legislature system, we should also use public debate, because law is something that cannot only be enjoyed by the elite, it should be enjoyed by the public. It has to be implemented in our daily lives. So that is why we train our members. They gave drama. They went to the grassroots organizations. They were able to pass a lot of documents. There were more than 40,000 signatures that we were able to collect, so that we knew more about the voices of the people. And by empowering these people, by empowering these women, they had more confidence in themselves. They knew more about the law. And that is why these women were actually very, very important in monitoring the performance of our parliamentarians. And they found that politics is not something that is so unfamiliar, so dangerous. They have more confidence in themselves. And when the law was passed, they became a very important organization in monitoring whether or not judges were aware of gender equality. So these are all very important processes that contributed to gender equality. Through the legal system, we were able to achieve these results. However, we also need to empower people so that they have the ability to move forward together. So you can go quick on your own, but if you want to go far, you need to go together. So that is why we work with lawyers, we work with scholars, and not only legal scholars, we also need to work with many people, because a lot of the articles within our civil code had a lot to do with Confucian culture. So we actually needed the assistance of non-legal scholars. We also need to bring together people from different backgrounds so that the scholars can empathize with the sufferings of these women. They can transform these sufferings into new laws so that we will be able to convince and persuade these people. However, more importantly, we can turn these concepts into words on paper. And through this process, we were able to make sure that women are protected by law. And because of these efforts, so starting in 2012, we started to push for same-sex marriage, the legalization of same-sex marriage, through litigation, through legislation, through interpretation of the grand justices. We were able to finally legalize same-sex marriage and turn Taiwan into the first Asian nation that legalized same-sex marriage. So this was a journey of more than 4 decades, but because of everybody's efforts, we were able to finally make our society more equal. I know that NGOs face a lot of difficulties, and there are a lot of challenges that must be surmounted. We can work with each other, support each other, and one day we'll be able to make a difference and achieve the ideal world that we want to create. Thank you.
I wish I could allocate more time to her, because she could come up with lots of work that we, herself and Taiwan and the coalition of NGOs have done in the past through litigation and through pushing forward good laws, legislation. Now let me turn to Clarence Chou for remarks, please.
Thank you, Professor Ye. All my 3 NGO friends, all the panelists and the participants, maybe I should say good afternoon now. I really so touched by all my friends share their experience in this panel. And now I also want to share my own experience through the following topic. I would like to divide my topic into 3 different things. And the first, I would like to say the NGO's role the NGO's legitimacy in Taiwan. Why I want to say this is because, as far as I know, most countries, they don't think NGO is good for their own their own place. But in Taiwan, if you have a chance to talk to the political sectors to the court, you will feel that they treat the NGOs very friendly. I think that's because there are two reasons. The first one is Taiwan has a special international status. After all, we are not the member of UN, so we don't have the chance to have a normal diplomatic relation with other countries. But to some NGOs, they can still to have connections with other NGOs in other countries. Which means the government sometimes they want to have their own connection with other countries. They can choose to cooperate with Taiwan's NGOs. And the other reason is, if you see Taiwan's history, for example, my organization, Taiwan Association for Human Rights, we also call STAR. We founded in 1984 under the martial law period. At that time, Taiwan was a one-party dominant system. But so many people wanted a more democratic society, so they choose to participate in some civil activists and constitute so many different parties, different clubs, and different NGOs to try to make the whole society better. Finally, we have a three-party alternation in 2000, 2008, and 2016, which also means that if one political party cannot have all government's power forever. Once they are not the ruling party, they should go down the stairs and listen to people's voice. They need to talk to the civil society. They need to cooperate with them. That's why in Taiwan, if you participate in NGO or an NGO activity, you have a bigger room to have a talk with some public sectors. And finally, we have a relative independent judicial system. So if we want to have a lawsuit, we want to bring some issue into the court, we will have a bigger chance to express what we want to do during the whole procedure. So that's Taiwan's NGOs, maybe not so special, but to me, it's a little different from other countries. And but now we also face another challenge. The first one is NGOs' legitimacy. In the past, if we want to criticize the government, it's easy because we just say, you don't have the regular elections. You cannot prove that people support you. But now we have general elections. People have a freedom of speech. So now we need to face another challenge is we spend more time to communicate with other civil societies. So now we cannot only want government to do something because other groups, other people who has different opinion with you, they also want to talk to the government. So we need to choose to talk to these people. Maybe they don't want to talk to you anymore. We still need to do that. That's why I said NGO's legitimacy now. We need to find the reason that in TAR we only have maybe 100 members, but we have strong voice. To other people, to other NGOs, they will think why you have a lot of power to have impact on the government. We need to echo these those questions. So that's first. I would like to say it's NGO's role in Taiwan, and the second is about NGO's challenge. Many of my NGO friends said about we don't have enough resources, money, or people, but to me it's also almost the same in Taiwan. Well, let me give you an example. I participate in NGO activities for more than 10 years. Every time when I go back to my home to see my parents, they always ask me, when will you go to find a normal job instead of NGO job? So, which means people doesn't care about your NGO experience in Taiwan. But the truth is, most of NGO participants, they have a very good experience and they have a very sortable ways and a lot of what they can do. I mean, just because people don't have any good any chance to to talk with those NGOs. They would say NGOs are just some bad people without walls, so they go on the street and say a lot of slogans without any reasons. But that's maybe they misunderstand a lot. But also we need to do something to convince people of their wrongful impression. So when now I'm also managing an NGO, I would also like to do something try to promote all of our staffs. I will say if a staff in TAR, he or she worked for more than five years, she is good enough to go to maybe a small company to be a leader. I think that should be okay. So that's first one we need to our challenge, and the second one is like lawyer Yu said, how we collaborate with different people. You can see all of the panelists are lawyers. However, if you want more the different thoughts, different values to put together to have a new strategy, new laws, new regulations, you need to find more people to join us together. But you need to find a way to let them are willing to join you. So you need to let the NGO we have we have so many arms, so many goals, but the methods, the tools are open and willing to accept different thoughts, so that other people in other fields would like to join you to work together. So I think maybe I spend too much time. I would like to say it's to me it's also a very meaningful chance to receive all other people's experience. So thank you, gracias, shukran, jadikan, dohang yabada. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I was very impressed by the last sentence. Well, lots of very international. Now, Lucas, you have the floor. Yes.
Yes. Do I still have 10 minutes? Okay, I'll do it quickly. Okay. Hi everyone. I'm Lucas. I'm the representative of Judicial Reform Foundation, JRF. And I believe the audience here in Taiwan are somewhat familiar with JRF. I hope so. But I would still like to take this chance to introduce JRF to our foreign audience and friends. In 1 minute. Okay. JRF was established in 1995 by a group of lawyers and law professors. And just several years after the martial law era that ended in 1991 in Taiwan, that's the time when the official in the ruling party can openly say something like, don't worry, the court is controlled and run by this party to his fellow party member. So that pretty much shows the lack of judicial independence in Taiwan 20 years ago. And after all these years, JRF tries to reform the judicial environment in Taiwan by litigating many public interest cases, such as wrongful convictions, death penalties, and social movement cases. We're also monitoring judges and prosecutors, lobbying relevant laws, and promoting legal education to public, from elementary school to universities, and which we see many aspects in common from legal agenda's marvelous work. And among the tasks that Samar had just mentioned, I'm particularly interested in the first part, monitoring, which is also an important and the very first task of JRF from 1995. To make a brief introduction, we adopt several methods for monitoring in different stages. And first of all, we send lawyers and law school students to the courtroom, and they write down the good parts and the bad parts of the judge's behavior. And then we collect, analyze, and organize those records and publish an annual report reviewing the top 10 judges and the worst 10 judges, which urges the judges to care and correct their behavior. But however, when we first announced the worst 10 judges, we also got sued by the judges for defamation. But we won at last. We have good lawyers. They have no chance. Okay. Second, at the second stage, after we successfully convinced the Congress to pass the Judges Act, which set forth the rules of evaluation and supervision upon judges, we established a center taking and verifying civilian complaint. If we find a judge's conduct is truly inappropriate, we will build a case and send it to the evaluation committee for further punishment. Thirdly, we set up a website to review the information of judges in Taiwan, including their basic background, such as how old is he, and when did he become a judge, what school did he go to, is there any relevant news report about him and his discipline records. And we also try to let civilians to leave comments on the judges in that website, like what you do on the Google map, like 4-star, 5-star. But however, we receive very much pressure, even threat from the government. And we did not carry out that successfully in the end. And the most recent development is that people in Taiwan feel that the judges are too independent and far from the people. They cannot understand why judges make such decisions and have low confidence of the judicial system. Therefore, the Congress has just passed the Lay Judge Act last month to allow citizens to sit on the bench and trial along with the professional judges, which led people to take a more closer look at the judicial system and try to let people and judicial system to understand each other. However, regarding our formulation monitoring work, we keep receiving the criticism and the resistance from the judicial system along the way and feel like they treat us as an enemy, even though we do not intend to do so. I can't help but wondering that is it inevitable for the civil society to be the opposite or opponent of the ones being monitored? But Samar just mentioned that legal agenda denormalize and convince what is the bad practice to the judges. I also noticed that the legal agenda initiated the Judicial Club of Lebanon and has 100 judges as members. It looked like that the relationship between civil society and judicial system in Lebanon is not so intense. So if Samar has time in the Q&A session, I really wish to know that did legal agenda encounter any resistance from judicial system, and how did they overcome it? And last, my last question is, I just heard that from Samar that they conduct a research about why there's only a little portion of lawyers doing public interest work. And as JLF, we also need a lot of new blood. So I'm desperate to hear from Samar that what's the conclusion of that research? How to enhance lawyers to join civil society, and how can I convince the young people in this room to join JIF? Thank you.
Wonderful reflection and the dialogue between Taiwan and the three recipients on the issue of rule of law. I know we are running very close to the originally set time, but a little bit late. But we still have time for Q&A and general discussion. And particularly, we still keep our representative of the recipient online to do some sort of Q&A and interaction. In the very end of Lucas' remarks, I heard about some question, directed to Summer, for example, about whether there are judicial resistance, and how you deal with that, and also how to sort of provide incentives or how to persuade young people to join something like that. In addition to that, I have been busy with these iPad things because I have to look into the question posed by not only the on-site audience, but anyone online from the international community. So I got lots of questions from all over the world, actually, and including some questions from the floor. Okay, I was asked to exercise my discretion by pointing out some questions and addressed to anyone of you. But of course, you can choose to answer that or not, or combine them, in your convenience. So this is not interrogation. This is just the sharing of the idea. Let me bring one question to Rizwana. There is one question addressed by Professor Zhang Wenzhen. Ask you whether in your capacity as a woman advocate, have you encountered gender-related challenges, including stereotype or discrimination in a very traditional society? May I add that to your list? And for summer, there is a question about your work on monitoring. Let me add to Lucas' question for you. In monitoring, are there menace or threat posed by government or interest group to suppress people's voice? And in what way and how do you counter them? For Dejusticia, I wonder whether Rodrigo or Vivian can ask, there is someone say there is currently a protest. I don't know whether it's true or not. You can verify that. There is a protest for police over-enforcement at Bogota. What role can NGO like Dejusticia play in such moment, for example? So we have question for almost to everyone. So I would like to reserve this time for my recipient to have some remark, including answering to this question, but not limited to answering this question. And please exercise your discretion. Should I begin? Should I? My Siri just misunderstood what I just said. Okay. Should I begin? Let's do that. Let's do that. Let's begin with summer, and then Dejusticia, and then BELA. Okay. Summer, please.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for the presentations and for the questions. Very quickly, the legal agenda did not itself initiate the Judges Club, but it played a very important role in making the idea of a judicial association acceptable in Lebanon, while it was repressed and rejected by the judiciary for a long time. So there's just a nuance. Now, about the resistances, definitely. I mean, we encountered, and both questions were about resistances. We encountered very important resistances among judicial hierarchy. For example, for a long time, for nearly 9 years until last year, the High Judicial Council in Lebanon was very aggressive towards all our efforts towards creating a judicial club or monitoring judicial activity. I've been told myself in a meeting with the head of the Supreme Court in Lebanon, which is also the head of the Judicial Council, I've been told explicitly, this is mind your own business. Like you as a researcher, professor, activist, it's not your job to look into what's happening in the judicial palace or into courts. He told us, mind your own business. Your job as a civil society organization, that was in 2014 or 15, your job as a civil society organization is to explain to the Lebanese people what we in the High Judicial Council say and think should be done. So this is how the high judicial authorities saw the role of civil society. Obviously, we reject this kind of point of view, and there was for a long time a very hard clash with the High Judicial Council and high judges. But our main support inside the judiciary was among young judges who were very disappointed by the state of the Lebanese judiciary, who were disappointed by the lack of independence, and who sometimes secretly, because they weren't allowed to, but who created links with Legal Agenda, but also other NGOs to publish their decisions, to to share their experiences in the judiciary. So yes, we encountered much resistance also from the Ministry of Justice, which never was very enthusiastic about our critical work about the judiciary. So here too, there were many obstacles put in front of our work. Now, fortunately enough, in Lebanon and in Tunisia also today, we don't have the kind of repression that we encounter in Egypt, for example, or in other Arab countries. So we never faced direct repression on this, but we faced many difficulties and obstacles, not only with executive power, but also with higher judges. I can talk a lot about this, but we don't have time now, of course, but we can develop it later if you want. About the public interest lawyers, very quickly, but here too, there's a lot to say, but basically, we found that in Lebanon and Tunisia, but especially in Lebanon, which has a very extremely liberal economy, the whole environment in which law students grow into, are trained into, is an environment that encourage private profits, private corporations, etc., and which is very disdainful of public initiatives, of lawyering, protecting vulnerable groups, etc. So law students in Lebanon are trained to, like a brilliant law student would be a law student that would be hired as a lawyer in a big bank or in a big company, and not with an NGO or with defending some vulnerable groups. So we saw that the entire legal education system was pushing lawyers towards defending big corporate and private interests instead of public interest lawyering and vulnerable groups lawyering. But that's also a very big issue we can talk about later. Thank you.
Good. Vivian or Rodrigo, about a question?
I will begin, and afterwards, if William wants to complement, it's perfect. So I'm going to answer first the question that was directly addressed to us concerning police abuses in the recent demonstration in Colombia, and demonstrations also made before in November of last year. There have been a lot of police abuses, especially in the last days. About 12 or 13 people were killed by the police in very, very serious events. So in that context, the role of NGOs such as Dejusticia is in a sense triple. We have made three sort of activities. First, in the November demonstrations, and we created coalitions of NGOs to defend people who were unjustly arrested by the police during the demonstration in order to accompany them if they were tried, or if not, to make them free. So that was the first activity, if you want, an urgent activity. The second is we decided to, with a coalition of NGOs, to present a strategic litigation before the Supreme Court in order that the court intervene to force the police to follow human rights standards when they address demonstrations. That litigation is still pending. And the third is that we have participated in public debates concerning the reform of the police. These abuses are linked with a very complex problem in Colombia, that we have a militarized police force. It has to do with certain background of Colombian society that is too long to explain, linked with the armed conflict that Colombia has lived for about 50 years. So we have a police that is not really in theory, yes, but is not really in practice a civilian force, but a militarized force. And we think that that is one of the main reasons why these abuses occurred. So we are involved in this kind of discussion of the police reform. Finally, I would like to address two of the issues that were raised by other discussants and our colleagues of BELA and Legal Agenda. The first one is the complexities because we deal with judicial reform, and the complexities when you deal with the judicial reform, that at the same time you have to defend the independence of the judiciary, but at the same time accountability of the judiciary. And that's very tricky because sometimes, for instance, in Colombia, now we have a very authoritarian government, and so if we go too much for accountability, it can be used by the government in order to undermine independence of the judiciary. But if you reinforce too much independence of the judiciary without accountability, as our colleague of Taiwan said, then we have two judges that are too independent and they are not accountable, and the judiciary become more a corporativist judicial branch, and that's not good for democracy. And the second point is about this beautiful metaphor that was made by one of the discussants, that when you go alone, you can go very quickly, but if you want to go further, you have to go collectively. And I think that's a very good idea. So that's why in Dejusticia we always try to make all our strategic litigations in cooperation with grassroots movements or with other NGOs, in order to show that it's not only an idea of Dejusticia, but a public interest issue that should be addressed by courts. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, great. Lastly, can I call Rizwana?
Yes, thank you very much. I think I would answer both positively and negatively to the question. Yes, the fact that I'm a woman and I'm actually filing cases against mighty corporations challenging state inactions, I do face criticisms that are gender insensitive. There are reports in the media where they try to show that my father does not belong to this particular political party. So although the stories are about my father, the picture they run is my picture. So it's a series of 3 stories about my father, but it's coming with my picture. So that should tell you who they are targeting. I do hear silly comments during hearing by very senior lawyers, although that's not very common, but it happens. If there are Facebook posts and if you go through the comments, most of the comments are positive, but then you find some silly comments that target you as a woman. They talk about your physique, your physical appearances. The corporate media is definitely against me. We have a mainstream media and a corporate media. The corporate media is very much sensitive about what I say, and they really keep an eye on things that BELA do, and they are not necessarily favorable to us. There have been demonstrations arranged by our opponents who have lost the cases to us. So there were street demonstrations that can be particularly intimidating to a woman. There have been attacks, deadly attacks on my family members. So these they do actually to weaken your moral, thinking that being a woman, if something comes on your family, you would backtrack much more easily than a male would do. There are cases that have been filed against me in different parts of Bangladesh, so about 13 baseless cases filed by our opponents. So I think because I'm a woman, their initial idea was that if they file cases, they attack my family members, they go for insensitive media propaganda, I'll face pressure from the society, pressure from within myself, pressure from the family, and would backtrack. So that's the whole psyche. But I would answer it from another perspective. The threat perspective is, for me to move to the fields very easily is getting increasingly challenging. The last 2 times I have been to the field during the pandemic, it so happened that when I came back, the community people who we were assisting, there have been cases against them, or there have been attempts by the police to harass them with cases under the Narcotics Act, and there have been attacks on my colleagues. So they were actually physically assaulted by local government elected representatives. So these are new phenomena that are adding up. Previously, field was risky, but I would always have the confidence that I'll make my way through. But now it's getting increasingly difficult because of the authoritarian regime that's sticking to power for too long a period and politicizing the entire chain of administration and local government institutions. On a positive note, because I am a woman, I'm trusted much more easily than a man. So when my opponents come out with stories about bribing me or kind of having some sort of a deal with me to get my voice silenced against a particular issue, these stories do not sell very easily in the market because, you see, I think the gender aspect has a lot to do with it, because when you say art, you say mother art. You never say father art. So people associate environmental movement as movements that can probably successfully and in a very credible way be run by the woman. So from the community perspective, I think that credibility has come more to me than to any of my male colleagues. So I think the reliance part of it, the trust part of it, the credibility part of it is given slightly more easily to BELA because it's woman run. So it's not only from the community, we also hear the judges saying that BELA is in safe hands, BELA does the hard work, and the government, when it attacks BELA, it doesn't necessarily start the debate about me making huge amount of money by running BELA. So that degree of respect is there, perhaps because I am a woman and the society views me differently. I mean, there is negative aspect of it also, because the society perhaps thinks that a woman cannot make money as much as the males do. But I would like to see the positive aspect of it, and that's the comparison of a woman with the symbol of protection of nature and not really destruction of nature. And there was another question, not question, but a comment that was directed to us about whether there are other groups like BELA in the country. There are many environmental movements, many environmental NGOs, but BELA for the last 26 years remains the only organization that is working solely on environmental justice. Yes, other groups file cases on environmental justice, but they have their private practice. They have other cases with which they go to the court, but BELA remains the only organization that's dealing with environmental justice issue on a pro bono level. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much for these sharings. I know it's already about 1 o'clock here. I know lots of us are hungry, but I feel your pain, and thank you so much. May I thank everyone here, particularly our friends from Colombia, from Lebanon, and from Bangladesh. You are great, and you have been very, very significant in pushing forward social justice issue. And you are also good in dialogue, in conveying the ideas to the world. And thank you so much. Thank you everyone who are on site or online from every corner of the world. So may I conclude by saying how happy and how grateful that we are to these international NGOs. They work at home, but also spread that spirit and value to the region. And also through this Tang Prize thing, we began to have sort of coalition and international networking. We began to know each other, talk to each other. So we see NGO leaders here in Taiwan began to talk to, to the leaders in other part of the world. And that's great. Not long ago, I represent Tang Prize amongst the recipient of the 3 institutions. At that time, the citation is like this. I would like to share with you once again. BELA, Dejusticia, and Legal Agenda were awarded for their efforts in furthering the rule of law and its institution through education and advocacy, utilizing innovative strategic litigation informed by vigorous scholarship. These organizations have shown extraordinary perseverance in promoting greater individual, social, and environmental justice. In many where foundation of the rule of law are under severe challenge. Here comes some of the summary for today. Next, please. The civil society actually participates in monitoring public agency for public interest and asks for reform, even under harshest condition to the rule of law. The NGOs bridge the gap between government and the people. They are not limited to the scope to court decision and other legal institutions, but also focus on the interactions between social and political movement, public opinion, and political branches. Just like what Samuel was saying, to enrich the public debate, public space. Just like what Rodrigo was saying, they need social space, something like that. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have had a wonderful discussion and sharing of ideas, and also a great recognition of the achievements from the work that our friends in other parts of the world has been doing. They are watched and noticed and seen by us. People from Taiwan would like to recognize this and spread that to the world. What kind of role, how significant, they have been doing in even very harsh conditions. So we learn a lot. They, unlike government official, unlike court justice, they don't have power. They are civilian, but they are extremely powerful. They don't have power, but they are extremely powerful because they believe themselves. They believe the cause, they believe the value, they believe the very significance of law. And together, not by one individual, not by one superstar, but together they move forward and make the impossible become possible. And I'm sure they are going to be even more powerful in the future. We are with them. Taiwan is with them. Thank you very much for your patience and attendance. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you for the participation. We have a photo group. Vivian, Rodrigo, Summer, and Rizwana. You are going to remain there with big head and big profile. And we are going to stand here. Please come closer. Let's stand. Let's stand. Let's stand. That's okay. That's okay. We can. 坐着不好，我们站着没关系。Okay. Let's show the world our friends here. Hey. Thank you.
And thank you, all the laureates and panelists. And I would now like to announce that the Master Forum of the 2020 Tang Prize in Rule of Law has now come to an end. Thank you all for joining today. We wish you a nice day.
Hello.
现场直播结束，谢谢大家。